Good evening, everyone, and welcome to this webinar masterclass on the role of happiness in uncertain times. And I'm very privileged, honored to introduce to you our guest for today, Professor Raj Raghunathan from the University of Texas. And of course, we have Shraddha as always with us. So let me, I have the opportunity to introduce our speaker today, and looking forward to this session myself. So Professor, thank you for coming in. Let me take a quick minute to introduce you and then hand it over to Shraddha. We live in uncertain times, and with each passing day, there is a sense of fear and foreboding that grips a lot of people. So, from the fear of losing loved ones to loneliness to managing work and relationships, fear of losing jobs, I think most people are truly stressed and struggling to find that emotional support and connect that we need. But there is hope. And with Professor Raj joining us today, we hope to find that through this masterclass of, how do we manage happiness and how do we manage ourselves in this time of crisis, right? And what role does happiness play in this context? So Professor, of course, has a unique and different perspective on the role of happiness, and we'll soon hand it over to him. And along with Shraddha, they will take you through the nuances of connecting with people, bringing creativity to work, and strengthening bonds. Let me take the opportunity to introduce Professor here. So he is the Zale Centennial Professor of Business at the McCombs School of Business at the University of Texas in Austin. His work has appeared and been applauded in several scientific journals like the Journal of Personality and Social Psychology, the Journal of Consumer Research, Organizational Behavior, and Human Decision Processes. Apart from that, his work has also been seen in media publications such as the Harvard Business Review, Fast Company, and the New York Times. So over to you, Shraddha, and thank you for the opportunity to introduce Professor.
Thank you so much, Subbu, and I can see your excitement. You seem happy. Professor Raj, thank you so much for joining today, and it's early morning for you, and you're joining us from Texas. Let's begin with first understanding what is happiness according to you, and should we be chasing happiness?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I think it's a very important question for many reasons, including that if you want to study happiness as a scientist, as a researcher, you first need to have an idea of what it is, right? If you can't define something, you can't measure it. If you can't measure it, you can't study it. So one way to kind of define happiness is to think of it as an umbrella term. Okay, what I mean by that is that all of us are familiar with lots of different positive emotions. I'm sure that all of us have experienced love at some level. We have experienced joy. We have experienced laughter, we have experienced hope, we have experienced awe, gratitude, serenity, and so on. And you can think of happiness as a kind of an umbrella term in the sense that if you're in any of these positive emotions, right, you can claim that you're happy. Okay, so it's not one unidimensional, monolithic kind of a construct. It's a kind of a multidimensional construct that includes all of these. In fact, I would say that not just these positive emotions, even some negative emotions. Okay, so in my class, I would do this, and we can't do it on Zoom, but I would ask people, how many of you guys are fans of horror movies, right? And like some 20-30% would raise their hands. And then I would ask, okay, how many of you are fans of roller coaster rides? Okay, and then again, some 20-30% would raise their hands. We seek these out, even though in the moment they might scare us, right? We might feel anxious, because we feel at some level that they are desirable experiences. It makes us happy at some level, okay? Likewise, working out at the gym, after that you feel sore, and the soreness is one level is pain, but you actually feel more satisfied the more sore you are, because you worked out well. So, if you want to define it in a way that kind of cuts through all of this, it's like this, okay? Happiness is a state in which you'd rather not be somewhere else doing something else. Okay. Happiness is a state in which you'd rather not be somewhere else doing something else. If you're perfectly happy right now, perfectly content with whatever is the situation right now, even if you're angry, right, and you want to be angry, then in my definition, you're happy. I hope that resolves it. Yeah. And sometimes the mood you're in is something you desire, and so that makes you feel more present. And other times you may not be in a good mood, but if you can somehow manage to be present, and there are ways to do it, then I think that you would be in a happier state.
The questions, everyone across the world, and we are so universal in our experience right now with this pandemic. I want to understand from you, what is your research saying about happiness during lockdown?
Yeah, so I'm actually embarking on a project on this right now. I've sent out some surveys to thousands of people around the world. As you might know, I teach these online courses, which has lots of people. And so I'm very grateful that, when I send out these survey links, lots of people fill it out. So I'm currently kind of looking at people's levels of stress, and they've definitely gone up because of the pandemic, and they continue to be up. And I'm also looking at what are the ways in which they're coping, and some of the ways may not be particularly healthy. So people are, I think, binge watching a lot of Netflix movies and things like that, which is not necessarily a good thing because it makes them feel that they're not as productive as they could be or should be, etc. And I'll have more details on that project later on. Let me just talk a little bit about what we know about happiness in times of stress. Okay, so one thing that we do know is that people who are generally happier, right, before the stress hit them, are going to do better. Okay, and it might at some level sound like a no-brainer, of course, but I think it's still important to know the research behind it. There is a professor called Barbara Fredrickson at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. I had the privilege of interviewing her last week. And she calls positive emotions, all of these kind of positive emotions we talked about earlier, like love and joy and so on, as micronutrients that your body needs in order for you to be able to be healthy. Okay, so that's the analogy. For you to be physically healthy, you need these micronutrients, right? You need the vitamins, you need the minerals. In a very similar way, for you to kind of be emotionally healthy, you need these positive emotions. If you don't have enough of them, then you're going to probably flounder and certainly not thrive. And what she's found is that in general, you need about 3, 4, 5 times as many positive experiences in your life as you have negative experiences for you to feel that life overall is pretty good and I'm thriving. Okay, why is that? That's because negative experiences tend to be more sticky. They tend to have more intensity, more weight, and they pull you down faster, right? I mean, if let's say that you wake up in the morning and you're feeling really good, okay, you only need one small bad incident to puncture that. Maybe you're stuck in traffic, or somebody that you thought you were close to, you say hi to them, they don't say hi back, or whatever, So that's why you need more positive than negative. So, but basically the idea is that you're going to do better if you're in a positive mood. Okay. I also interviewed this guy called Pete McGraw, who's a humor researcher. And this is a very intuitive thing that he said, but, at the same time, we forget it, I think, often, is that think about a time in which you have a complaint about somebody or about something, and you call somebody for help, maybe your spouse, maybe a friend, maybe a sibling. Okay, now if you start complaining all the time about that problem, right, they might support you, okay? But the third, fourth, fifth time you start complaining about the same thing, and you become known as a complainer, right? They're probably going to be like, oh shit, this person is calling me again. I don't want to pick it up now, because I know they're going to complain, okay? So if you're in a positive mood though, right, even as you're going through that whatever negative situation in your life, you're probably going to be better able to see the lighter side of things. I had a really shitty day, but there's something funny that happened in all of this. Okay, let me tell you. Okay, so when you do that, what he finds is that people are more likely to support you. So even in moments of stress, if you can see the lighter side of things, and I think that's only possible or is more possible if you're feeling good yourself, then you're actually going to get more support, even though probably objectively speaking, the person who can't see the lighter side of things actually needs more support, right? The person who can see the lighter side of things ends up getting more support. So it's important in many ways to be happy, particularly in a time of crisis.
Today, people are in isolation, right? And everyone is more or less alone, and more so alone in your own mind. I also do that, and I'm also guilty of that. You get caught up in your own thoughts. And how do you deal with that, and how do you deal with people around you if you see someone around you who's also going through this kind of a loop?
Right. So it's a vicious cycle sometimes, and in the research they call it rumination. You can't stop rumination, right? So you're kind of like on a spiral of negativity, and sometimes it's positive, then it's virtuous, but mostly it's vicious. You kind of start on a negative thought that leads to another negative thought, and so on. So my simple kind of suggestion here is that it's very difficult to actually control your thoughts. I mean, you can do that through mindfulness practices and all that. It's much easier to control your behavior. Okay, much easier to control your behavior. Even that is tough, but it's easier than controlling thoughts. And so the idea is that if you control your actions, if you control your behaviors, then that in turn will control your thoughts. And so what am I saying here? What I'm saying is, if you know that certain kinds of environments, certain kind of stimuli reliably evoke negative emotions in you, okay, and they're not productive for you, then don't expose yourself to it. Don't look at the news for the 19th, 20th time in a day. I mean, nowadays they keep saying breaking news. It's never not breaking, right? And they make you feel as if you have to look at this, otherwise you're going to miss out on some useful, critical piece of information that's going to be so crucial for your survival. No, it's BS. Okay, they just want to sell you news because they get their revenues through that. So the idea is to ration your time on news, maybe spend an hour a day looking at it. Okay, I can guarantee you that the earth is not going to, come under your feet. You're going to be well informed. Other people will make sure you're well informed. Okay, so ration your news. I think that's very, very important. Also, don't expose yourself to negative people that much. Okay, again, I mean, Pete McGraw, this guy, the humor researcher, he said that avoiding one negative person in your life will boost your happiness as much as seeking out the company of 5 positive people.
Wow. That's big. Yeah.
That's very big. Yeah, it's a very big effect. And, sometimes we can't avoid it, obviously. They might be our parent or sibling or spouse. So, carve out some alone time. Take care of yourself first, right? I mean, like that old cliche of putting on your own mask first before you help others, your children on an airplane. So take care of yourself first. I think it's very important to cut out the negativity, seek out positive stimuli. Maybe it's going for a walk. Maybe it's, watching some humorous videos, etc. Or maybe something that's more spiritual, whatever it is. Okay. Identify a few things, 3 things, let's say, that reliably put you in a good mood, make you feel more centered. Don't compromise on those. Okay. Even if you're not feeling like it, working out, for example, is a big one for me. Even if I don't feel like it in the moment, I just force myself to get there, because I know that there's never been a time where I've not felt better after the workout than I did before it. Yeah. I know that over time. And so I just pull myself into it. I put myself on the conveyor belt of the workout. Nowadays, there's no gyms, but there's lots of YouTube videos on working out at home, and they're awesome.
There were concerns, will people be able to effectively work remotely? Now, the other thing is happening is that people are working round the clock while they're working remotely. How should one deal with that? Like, I am also like, there's no sense of Saturday, Sunday. We're all working all the time.
Yeah, so that is true. I think that we went down that road a while back with email and smartphones. When my dad used to go to work, right? Work started at 9:30, something like that, and you'd go into his office and first have a chai, aram se, and then things would start. And when he came home, there's hardly anybody calling him. Certainly, there's no cell phones, no email, etc. So there's a compartmentalization of personal life and work life, right? And you need that breather. You need to rejuvenate before you can get back and attack the things, on your things to do list. And now we don't have that, unfortunately. And so we are more tired, I think. We're running all the time, even in our sleep, it seems like. So naturally, we're feeling more burnt out. So I think that this is where, what's really going to separate the people who are going to thrive in this and do well, and the people who are going to flounder, is the self-discipline of compartmentalizing your life. Okay. And telling yourself that, look, I'm not going to take my cell phone into my bedroom. I'm just not going to do it. I'm not going to take my computer into my bedroom, not just because it's going to tempt me to look at it. It's going to be easy for me to reach out and look at it, but also because once I open it, I'm going to get into that rabbit hole. Okay. It's very easy to start out saying, I'm just going to answer one email or whatever. And then 2 hours later, you're like browsing something on the internet. Okay. So don't even bring it in. It's going to emit blue light that's going to kill your melatonin levels. You're not going to be able to sleep well. Lots of bad effects that occur because of it. So you need to discipline yourself. You need to compartmentalize your life, at least in terms of actions. Now, ideally, you want to do it in terms of your thoughts as well. Okay. So it's one thing to say, okay, I'm not going to get my laptop and my cell phone into my bedroom. That's an action, right? It's difficult to pull off. But what's even more difficult, but far more effective, is to actually have control over your mind, so that you tell your mind that, okay, I'm not going to think about that issue because I've already thought about it 20 times and I've not come to a good solution on it. And it's just one of those things that I can't control. Okay, maybe it's a fight with a boss. Maybe it's a uncertainty over the future about something. There's no point thinking more about, ruminating about it. Okay, so I'm just not going to think about it. And one way to do that, to gain that expertise, is to practice counting your breaths. It sounds like a totally unrelated thing, but if you can just close your eyes and say, okay, for the next 20 breaths, okay, come what may, I'm not going to let my mind waver from my breath. I'm going to track my breaths, okay? I'm going to keep track of, okay, first inhale, first exhale, that's one. For second one, third one, and so on for 20 breaths. And if you can also focus in on your sensations while the act of breathing is creating in you in different parts of the body, then what you're doing is you're practicing the ability. Your mind will get distracted, right? I mean, it'll want to think of this, it'll want to think about that. It'll tell you things like, what are you doing, wasting your time? There's so many fires burning, and here you are sitting like nothing is happening. All of these kind of negative things are going to come in, but you're going to tell yourself, okay, this is only going to take me 3 minutes, okay? And I have to practice this so that I gain control over my mind. And when you do that, and you're able to focus in on your breath, what you're practicing at a meta level is the ability to let the thoughts you want to let into your mind and keep away the thoughts you do not want to let into your mind away from your mind. And if you have that ability, it's going to come in so useful. And Shraddha, you're a super successful person, so you know this. I mean, it's so important if you're a leader to have this ability, because if you let anything and everything come into the mind at all times, you're going to be a mess. You're not going to be able to handle things. You need to relax, to rejuvenate, to connect with personal life and all that before you go back to work, right? And if you don't have that ability, all of us have it, but if you practice it, you'll get better at it.
Professor Raj, when you were saying this about breathing, I wanted to ask you, and on behalf of everyone else, so I practice meditation and it helps me. It has taken me a lot of time to get into that zone. But, one of the things I had heard a year back on YouTube from Eckhart Tolle in The Power of Now. So in his conversation, he was saying that, breathing is one thing, but for many people, just breathing the thought, because it has become such a cliche, breathe in, breathe out, looks like a huge, heavy activity. So what he was saying is that whenever you are stressed and ruminating, like you were saying, so said, touch your hand, just get into that sense of, because sensation vis-a-vis telling again your mind while it's ruminating to say, breathe in, breathe out, touch your hand and get yourself aware to your own sense, which you also mentioned. So could be easier. Do you think so?
Yeah, I think that's a great insight. The thing with the breath is that it's subtle, and it's ever changing, and it's something that is within your control and not in your control completely. So it's right on the edge of many things. Okay, so it is like life. It's ever changing. It is kind of partly in your control, mostly not in your control.
Yeah.
Okay, etc. So it's a beautiful thing in that sense. And your breathing can change your mood a lot. And once you start focusing on your breath and just being aware of the breath without trying to control it, etc., you'll naturally observe that it slows down. And that creates this beautiful feeling. So I like the breath in many ways, but you're also right that it might be tough for many people. It's not tangible enough, perhaps. And so just rooting yourself. I took this Vipassana course a few years back, and for those who have taken it, you know that this is a 10-day kind of silent meditation retreat, and you have to maintain what's called golden silence, basically not even look at people, because there's communication that goes on through eyes. And the idea is to not let any new stimulation enter your mind, so that you can kind of really see it calm down. In that, there are these kind of lectures by Goenka, who's the founder of this particular way of doing things. He talked about how the Buddha had said that you at all times you need to be rooted in where you are physically. Okay, and so Buddha apparently recommended touching base with your physical sensations all the time. Okay, very frequently. And so Eckhart Tolle's recommendation seems to be very much in line with that.
What would you tell people if they had to find happiness in their own being, in their own context, in their own lives, and especially while most of us are dealing with a very tough situation in our lives?
So I do a lot of research on happiness, true. And because of the research, I have gained a better understanding of some of the more reliable determinants of happiness. And I've had more of an opportunity than most people do, I think, to introspect on these ways of improving your happiness and actually implementing them and figuring out for myself what works and what doesn't and all that. Okay. But in no way am I, happiness is one of those things that really humbles you at some level. If you're for it, if you're seeking to improve it, because life is very good at throwing curveballs at you, right? Oh, you think you can be happy? Well, let me show you. Okay. So I do want to kind of point that out. Okay. I'm not somebody who's experientially arrived at a point where I have mastery over my own happiness. So let me, you mentioned that happiness is a relative term, and there are many different interpretations of that, at least two that I can think of. One is that different things make different people happy. In that sense, it's subjective, it's relative. For some people, it might be eating a dosa. For other people, it might be eating a pancake. Okay. For some people, it might be hanging out with friends. For other people, it might be getting into their work. So I think it's very, very important for people to first sit down and ask themselves, what kind of experiences do I seek in my life? Okay. Happiness is a abstract umbrella term, as we discussed earlier. So what specific set of emotions do I want to have in my life? And most people would, I think, say that love is very, very important. Okay, either romantic love or even kind of platonic love. But love is very, very important. I imagine that most people would say that having a lot of laughter is great if it happens, right? And you can't only have, here I think that it's useful to think of a 2x2 in your head. One axis being whether it's positive or negative, right? Positive emotions or negative emotions, and the other axis being how arousing the emotion is. Okay, and by arousing, I don't mean sexual arousal. I mean in terms of how energetic is that emotion. Okay, and there are kind of low arousal emotions which are calming, serene, those set of emotions, and then there are high arousal emotions like joy and enthusiasm and interest. And what's been discovered, kind of interesting, is that as younger people tend to seek the more high arousing emotions. Okay, that's how they tend to define happiness. They get bored faster if they just asked to sit and meditate or hang out in the house. Whereas older you get, the more you start to appreciate these low arousal emotions, and the more you start to appreciate the beauty in ordinary things. Just having a nice cup of tea in the morning, looking at a sunrise, or seeing a baby smile and things like that. And those things, younger people just can't get it. They don't understand that. What the heck are you talking about, right? So it's useful to kind of think about different emotions across your lifespan, and how different we tend to prioritize different kinds of experiences. Okay, yeah, and it also turns out East and West are different. In the West, it's more high arousal emotions. People in the US, for example, really, even if they're older, they seek these kind of energizing, I want to go on a zip line ride or whatever. Whereas in the East, I think it tends to be that people seek more calming, or used to be. I don't know if things are changing.
No, it is still like that.
Okay. So I think that's the first order of business, is to have some clarity on what kinds of experiences, what kind of emotions are you seeking in life. For me personally, the emotions that I most like are one of having a lot of sense of time affluence. I don't really have a lot of things on my things to do list. I can just shoot the breeze. I can do whatever I want. I have a lot of mental freedom. And there's a certain lightheartedness that comes into the picture when you're in that mood, right? So you can see the lighter side of almost everything. I like to engage in a lot of bantering, right? So often people say this, and I think that they say it in a somewhat positive fashion, is that, we can never really tell if you're serious or not, right? About something. So that brings out the best in me. I have a sense of humor then, and this light-hearted, gentle humor without hurting people, but engaging in a banter with them, about things. That to me is the emotion that I seek the most. And so I've discovered that over time, and I try and put myself in a place where I'm like that, most of the time. So that's the first thing. Another way in which you can think of happiness as relative is that, you can't really sustain happiness over a long period of time. If you have, let's say you're earning $10,000 a month now, it's going to make you really happy. And then, in a couple of months, you're going to get used to it. Now you want to earn even more. In that sense, it's relative. That is that, it changes and you want more now. And that is certainly true. There's something called hedonic adaptation, and that happens. And it happens with these emotions too. So even though I like that lightheartedness and so on, doesn't mean that that emotion alone is going to be, I'm going to be able to sustain it forever, right? And the reason why I brought up that graph, the 2x2 positive valence and negative valence and high and low arousal, is that even though there's maybe a default tendency to focus on one kind of emotion, maybe more high energy, positive emotion, you also need the opposite in your life.
Yeah.
You can't forever be on a high, right? You have to kind of slow down and take a nap, take a rest, eat, re-energize, and then go back and do that. Okay. So it's important to understand that even though happiness is relative, I think that if you can kind of have a clarity of what different kinds of emotions that you seek out of your life, and then make a plan or make a list of things that reliably put you in that mood state that you seek, I think you'd really be doing yourself a great service, and it'll be a little bit easier for you to experience those emotions. Okay, so that's what I would say. I don't know if I fully answered your question.
No, I get what you're saying, but somewhere you have to consciously also work to put yourself in that state, right? Like it is like you go to the gym or you brush your teeth. You have to do it also. Yeah.
You have to do it. So that's the other thing is that I think, thanks for bringing that up. Oftentimes, people seem to think that I know that I have to work hard to get a great job. I know that I have to work hard to get a good body, or to be healthy and so on. But somehow with happiness, they just feel that they deserve happiness to fall into their lap. They don't really have to work towards it, and it's just one of those things that's it just needs to come to me. It won't, right? So if anything, happiness is even more lofty as a goal. It's not surprising that people like Aristotle and the Buddha went after it, and we kind of feel inspired by them, because I think that they cracked some code.
Yeah.
And so it's a very lofty goal, and really the secret is it boils down to doing lots of simple small things. Okay, each of which is probably only going to add maybe 2, 3, 10% at most, but together they're going to elevate you to another level.
There has to be a sense of self-awareness, and there has to be a sense of self-awareness, ability to track our own mind, our own mental state. How does one do that, and what are some of the steps that you can tell us that one can do that to constantly be present and track your own mental state?
Right. So earlier you asked this question of, and I think you did not ask it again, and I forgot to answer it, which was, maybe the first question: define happiness, and is it okay to chase it? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So I do want to mention here, now that you brought up this question of awareness of how happy you are and tracking it, that it's very important not to chase happiness. And this might seem like a very kind of contradictory point at some level, because I'm saying that happiness is important, seek it, etc., try to maximize it, but yet it's very important not to chase it. So the thing is that what the research has found is that the more you constantly monitor your happiness and chase it, and want to be even happier than you are, the less happy you get. You kind of get dissatisfied at the fact that you're not as happy as you want to be, so you're unhappy about being not happy. So it's very important not to chase happiness. That doesn't mean that happiness is not important. Okay. Yeah. So I'll give you another analogy like this. Love is very, very important in our life. Love is very important. Okay. But if you chase the object of your love, right, chances are lower that you're actually going to get it, because people don't like being chased. Okay. They find it creepy, and they find it, you respect things less if they're easy to get. And so the more obviously you're after somebody for love, and we see this in lots of movies, right? That somebody's chasing somebody all the time, and it gets irritating. It's very similar. Sleep is another example. If you kind of chase sleep, and if you're constantly wondering if you're going to fall asleep and all that, it's actually a better recipe for insomnia than it is for actually falling asleep. So I think it's very important to prioritize happiness, but not pursue it, is how I put it. Okay, and it might seem like a subtle distinction, but it's a very, very important distinction. And there are lots of other goals like that, where we need to prioritize them. And what it means is, again, going back to this idea that you need to do lots of small things. So it might mean eating healthy, having a good lifestyle, sleeping well, exercising. Obviously, that's going to involve nurturing your relationships, right? Not burning out, finding something that you're passionate about and do those things, right? Have enough money, enough access to resources that your basic needs are not in jeopardy. Lots of small things that you can do, including practicing that breath control. Lots of small things, each of which is going to add a little bit. And that is the way to prioritize happiness, but not constantly measure it. Okay. So that said, I do think that it's very important to be aware. It's very important to be self-aware. It's very important to understand, get in touch with your body, understand what you're going through right now, what kinds of emotions you're experiencing, because that knowledge is going to make it more likely that you're going to have the right set of habits in your life. So a couple of things that I would recommend here. One is, maintaining a journal. Maintaining a journal. Now, one thing about all of these happiness practices is that it's going to take diligence. It's going to take a lot of diligence. Very similar to how any lofty goal that you want to achieve, you want to get a great GPA, it's going to take diligence. You want to get a great, body, it's going to take diligence. Okay, there's nothing worthwhile in life that, you really feel like it'd be great to achieve it. That's going to come easy. Okay, but doesn't mean it doesn't have to be not fun. It can still be a lot of fun. Okay, but it's probably not going to come easy. So journaling is one of those things that's going to make you super self-aware in a very good way. And what it involves is just writing things that happen during the day, right? And especially focusing on emotionally significant things that made you feel really good or really bad. And also carving out a story behind why you think it happened. Okay. If you can do that on an everyday basis, I have a colleague here at UT Austin. His name is Jamie Pennebaker. He's got a lot of research on this. It's called self-disclosure. You're disclosing to yourself what happened. And that's the practice in journaling. And if you do that, rather than just chronicling everything that happened, as facts that happened, you also get into the why. Why do I think this happened? So carving out some meaning, carving out some story out of it. I think it gives you something called psychological closure. It allows you to put to rest whatever happened today. You've got a story for why it happened, and maybe these are negative things that happened. You've got a story though, and it gives you psychological closure. So even though you're revisiting these things, even if they're negative, you actually fall asleep better. That's what's been found in the journaling practice. And not only that, it also makes you more self-aware. So that's the practice that I have. And I have, coincidentally, I have 3 journals here because I was giving a talk to another group, and this topic came up. And so you can probably see that these are all journal entries that I've made over time. And I have 20 of these. I've been doing it for now quite a few years. And I end every day with 3 good things that happened that day. Okay. And this is important because psychological closure is important. But if your tendency is to carve out a negative story and a negative interpretation every day, even though you're achieving closure, you have a reason or a story for why what happened, it's a negative story, right? You're blaming other people. You're blaming the external environment. So if you can end with 3 good things that happened to me that I completely did not deserve, it was just pure luck that these things happened, right? Then that is going to make the subconscious part of your mind recognize that you're taken care of and that good things are happening to you. And so your interpretations will start to change to become a little more positive over time. So don't just maintain a journal, it'll make you self-aware, but also end with 3 good things, small good things. Every day if you write 3 good things, they're not going to be big good things, right? They're going to be smallish good things. Like, for example, ran into an old friend, right? So if you write that, then it's going to put you in a more positive state.
So there's this question, how interlinked are work, happiness, and productivity? Would you have any anecdotes on how happiness can increase productivity?
Sure, yeah. There's a lot of research on this, especially nowadays in the last about 20 years, I would say. There's a couple of books that I would recommend. One is called How to Be Happy at Work by Annie McKee. And another one that's a big bestseller called The Happiness Advantage by Sean Achor, who talks about the link between happiness and productivity. And one big theme that emerges from the book and from the research too is that oftentimes we think that happiness comes from being productive. Happiness comes from success. Okay, that's the message that we're all fed, right? Especially maybe in India, when I was growing up, my mom would say that, work hard, then later on you can relax, okay? Because you'll be successful. But the problem with that is that relaxation never comes, really. I mean, you're so used to working hard and being, always future oriented, seeking out a goal in the future that you're never really present anymore, right? So that future where you're supposed to be relaxed and happy never really comes, okay? What the research has found is that if there is a relationship between being successful and happy, at best, it's a middling, tenuous kind of relationship. There's a far more reliable reverse direction of causality. That is, that happiness more reliably leads to success than does the reverse, okay? And I can talk a little bit about why success and smartness often come in the way of happiness. But the reason why happiness leads to productivity, there's many reasons, and we can talk about at least 3 here. One is that happier people are healthier. happy people have better functioning immune systems and respiratory systems and cardiovascular systems. They live longer. So in the organizational setting, what that means is happier people show up for work more often. And there's some very good research on that. They take less sick leave, basically. Okay. And you probably know this, having employees under you, that, the more the number of days you show up, the more productive you're going to be, right? I mean, it's like Woody Allen said, showing up is half the work done. Okay. So that is one. The second is that happier people are more collegial, right? People who can see the lighter side of things, who can banter a little bit, can be silly often, right? Rather than always a wet blanket and criticizing and pulling down other people. That's not good for teamwork. Okay. Happy people are better in teams. Happy people are more creative, it turns out. Even now we are having to be creative in this new working from home environment and things changing. And I'm pretty sure I'm going to interview this guy called Nick Marks this coming Saturday. He's a happiness researcher, and he works a lot with organizations and tries to improve their happiness. And I'm going to talk to him about what he's found with the COVID-19. Okay, who are the teams that are performing better? And I've already know a little bit about some of that research, and I know that he's found that happier teams are doing better than less happy teams. Because they're more creative, they come up with more ideas. Okay, and there's some research behind. Barbara Fredrickson has done a lot of research on that positive people are more broad in their outlook, etc. Okay, it's called broaden and build theory. So lots of evidence that happiness is important, and happiness increases productivity. The happiest quintile, the happiest 20% of the people in general tend to earn about 30% more salary than the least happy quintile. So not only are people more productive, it affects their bottom line. Obviously so, right? I mean, it's just a natural conclusion to come to that if you're more productive, you're going to get paid more. Happier organizations tend to outperform less happy organizations in terms of revenue, in terms of profits. It's, Nick Marks says that it's one of the best KPIs, key performance indicators, is how happy your employees are, because that has a huge impact on how productive they're going to be. So, they're interlinked, and the direction of causality is more from happiness leading to productivity rather than the other way around.
How do you keep yourself energized, engaged in this time, and how important is it for organizations to focus on team? And second is the responsibility of an individual, of an employee who is today isolated, is working remotely. How should they keep themselves energized and motivated, and what should they do to help their own selves?
Yeah, so let me talk a little bit about some things that you can do for yourself, and then some things that you can do for your coworkers. Okay, so earlier on we talked about this idea that in this situation it's very easy to get into that ruminating mindset, constantly thinking of the negative Rolodex of thoughts. Okay, so it's very important to prevent it and try and experience productive, positive emotions, so that you're enthusiastic, you're resilient, you're hopeful, you're optimistic, and you get to work and you do it with energy. Okay, so one thing that we did mention is that try to ration the news, don't look at it too much, to avoid negative people, right? I think those are important, but I also think that you can proactively do some things rather than avoiding things in order to be in a better state. And so one of those things is to lead a healthy lifestyle. I can't underscore this enough, because if you're not feeling good from the inside out, it's impossible to feel good at the mental level. If you don't have good physical health, if your cells are not singing with joy, so to speak, there's no way that your mind is going to sing with joy. Okay, so lead a healthy lifestyle that really boils down to very, very simple things. We all know: eat well, eat healthy food, don't eat a lot of simple carbs or fried food and things like that. Exercise at least 20 minutes every day. In this context, I've really fallen in love with this workout routine by a person called Pamela Reif, R-E-I-F is her last name. She's a German lady model, and she has all these workouts, pretty intense, but if you can get through them, right? And over time, I've actually improved. I've become better at being able to do them 100%. But there's the 20-minute beginner workout that I would recommend. You can start with that and just, try and work out with your kids or your family members. It can be a group activity. So take care of your health. That's a big thing. Okay, so lead a healthy lifestyle. There's a few other things. So in terms of productivity, I think what has happened is, because we're working from home, there's no clear demarcation of in terms of physical space or in terms of time. Okay, this is when my personal life stops and my work life begins, and so it's very porous, and you can very easily slip from one to the other and back. And because often we take the easy way out, I think that we end up slipping back into the kind of not doing anything, lazing mode rather than the work mode. So I talked to this researcher at Stanford, her name is Suchi Huang, who works on goals and goal achievement, and basically asked her for some tips on working from home, right? How to be productive. And so 3 things that she said. One is that carve out a non-negotiable time for work and say that, okay, during these moments, I'm definitely not going to do not work things, okay? So I'm not going to browse the internet. I'm not going to kind of binge watch a movie. I'm not going to chat with friends and so on and so forth. I'm going to maybe even close my email so that I can really focus on my work. And it doesn't need to be like a huge amount of uninterrupted time. It can be 3 hours altogether in the whole day. That's it, right? That you only work and do nothing else. And you can even take breaks during those 3 hours. You can say 20, 25 minutes. There's something called the Pomodoro Technique. I don't know if you're aware of this, but this idea is that we are good at maintaining focus for about 20, 25 minutes. And so what you do is you kind of set an alarm for about 20, 25 minutes. And the reason it's called Pomodoro Technique is because Pomodoro is Italian for tomato. And there is this stopwatch or timer that's shaped like a tomato. Actually, no. Anyway, I mean, it's called Pomodoro Technique, but basically it's working in small chunks of time, about 20, 25 minutes, and then taking a 5-10 minute break. Okay, so identify a time of the day when you're mentally at your sharpest. I call this your cream time, and protect it. Okay, protect it. Don't fritter it away, because you're going to feel really lousy at the end of the day. You're going to be unenergized. You're going to be pulled down mentally, emotionally, physically, even if you fritter that time away. So maybe it's 9 a.m. to 12 noon, whatever the time is but for 2-3 hours every day, don't fritter it away. Work. Okay, be disciplined. So that is one. And for that, it might help to have a certain designated spot that is your own spot for work inside the house. So create a little bit of a home office, right? If you can afford it. And also, dress up. Okay, and it might seem like a really silly thing to do because you're not even stepping out. So why not work in your pajamas? But I think we get a self signal that we are more professional, or we are now in work mode if we actually do some of the things that are associated with being in the work mode. So take a nice shower, shave, dress up, wear a tie, okay, sit down at your desk, and I think you'll feel more energized to work. Okay. And you can also kind of like shift. I did say that carve out a space for you, which is your home office, but I do think that sometimes it helps to kind of move around a little bit, okay, because you feel bored of a particular environment. So maybe go sit on the couch and work for a little bit and come back. So it's a little bit, there's a certain set of default practices, but be flexible around those default practices and go easy on yourself. Okay, this is not a time at which you've got to pull out the whip and maintain the same lofty levels of productivity that you had before. I think that you need to also go easy on yourself. You need to be self-compassionate. You need to practice some taking care of yourself practices. So take care of yourself health-wise. That's the first thing that I said. Well, the very first thing I said is ration the news and all that. Take care of your health. Hold a regimen. Be disciplined so that you're more productive than you have been perhaps in the last 2 months. Those are the set of things that I would say you do for yourself. Okay, in terms of your coworkers, especially if you're a manager, it's not a big surprise that this is a time of great uncertainty, right? Time of great uncertainty, and so a lot of employees, what they're looking for is some kind of reassurance. And if you can afford it, tell them that, look, you're not going to get fired. Okay, for this time, you're not going to get fired. All right. Maybe everyone's got to take a little bit of a pay cut, but you're not going to get fired, which is what the University of Texas at Austin told us, really. Okay, at some level, we're not going to get our raises that were promised, but we're also not going to get fired, which is a huge thing. Okay, give people more information perhaps than you think is necessary. Okay. So keep them informed. When you don't meet people face to face, when you don't have those, informal chats around the cooler in the coffee room, a lot of, people don't have information. What's called tacit knowledge is not exchanged anymore. Okay. So as a leader, it's important to kind of email them, hold these informal Zoom calls or meetings that are optional, that people can come in and ask any questions. I think that is very, very important. The other thing is, because people are not meeting face-to-face, a lot of information is lost that would have been accessible non-verbally. There's a lot that we can just by saying, Shraddha, smile today. Okay, I know that she's happy with me. Okay, that is missing now. And so, rather than kind of exchange only emails, get on a Zoom call. Have these informal happy hours. Okay, me and my colleagues get together once a week in order to just, sip a glass of wine and just catch up, no real agenda, just to make sure that everything is okay. And the final thing I would say is that give people more autonomy than you might have in the past. Everyone's got a different way of dealing with this. And it's not clear which are the best ways to deal with this. And the less judgmental we are about other people's ways of working with things, the better off we'll be. Because we don't know, one thing that we are kind of known abstract, but we forget, I think, in the moment, is that these kind of times of great stress and upheaval reliably produce really great innovations later. Okay, so 1 year from now, lots of really amazing things are going to emerge that would not have emerged had this pandemic not hit us. Okay, so kind of like, be optimistic, think of those positive things, encourage the people who are offbeat mavericks, who have new creative ways of doing things that you might not personally like, but might well be the door to a new opportunity for your company as a whole. So it could be in my space, coming up with new ways of disseminating information. Okay, so rather than think of classrooms as physical spaces in which you have 1.5 hour lectures, if somebody is going to have 2-3 minute videos, but a string of them that people can watch at any time, right? Maybe that's a way to do it. Okay, maybe you can have peer grading rather than one instructor grading everybody's deliverables and so on. So just be open to creativity is what I'm saying. So long-winded answer, okay, but basically 3 things you can do for yourself. Okay, maintain good health, be productive, but don't be harsh on yourself and ration news. And then 3 things you can do for your coworkers: inform them more than you think might be necessary, and reassure them if you can that they're not going to get fired. Okay, and meet them face to face in informal settings so that they get some semblance of nonverbal rather than just contacting them by email. And then give people more autonomy. Don't be judgmental on how they do their work. So those are the sets of things that I would recommend.
Having healthy habits, doing these things, but that also requires coming out of your own inertia, coming out of your own rumination, coming out of your own habits. Without any reason, or maybe with some reason, you start feeling low and it becomes even more difficult to come out of it. So people are asking, what are some of the easy, simple steps you can tell us? 2-3 things that we can do to at least come out of this self-low feeling, so that then we can move towards happiness feeling.
Right. So look, each of these things are important silos. You got to take care of your health. You got to take care of your relationships. You got to be productive. Okay. All of us understand that. And you don't need to necessarily aim for a very lofty thing. And maybe what I've said in each of these things are relatively lofty. Okay. But I think it's very, very important. This is a great question you asked me, by the way. Very, very important that you start out slow and take it easy on yourself. Okay. I've just created an Excel spreadsheet for myself on which every column is a new day. I started it on the 1st of June, a couple of days back. And every row is a small thing that I want to do every day. Okay. So I want to floss my teeth every day. All right. I want to take some supplements every day. I want to do at least a 2-minute mindfulness practice, meditation practice every day. Okay. So I have like maybe about 17 or 18 things there. And I can show you the column by sharing my screen. Basically, I've not managed to do everything every day. Okay. But on average, I'm pretty sure that at the end of the month, I'll have done everything some 20, 25 times. A couple of things I'll have done them every single day. So the idea is to kind of take a small thing in each of these silos. Okay, maybe 3 hours every day is too much for you to handle, right? To not look at email and only focus on work. So make it half an hour, But start somewhere, start small. Okay, maybe healthy lifestyle, 20-minute workout, Pamela Wright workout is too much for you. Okay, so just say, okay, 2,000 steps every day. All right. Yeah. So look at what you naturally do. Maybe it's 2,000 already. So make it 2,500. Okay. Yeah. So small things, bite off small things that over time give you the confidence that you can now kind of, maybe take on a little bit more. Confidence is very, very, very important. It's crucial here. And the reason why we get into this kind of funk and inertia, and now it feels like we're trying to lift ourselves with our bootstraps, right? Is because we don't have confidence. We don't have the self-confidence that I can pull this off. And it's easy to get into that rut. Okay, but it's also kind of relatively easy to get out of it if you're just smart about it, and if you just take off bite only chunks, small chunks that you know that you can do. You need the cooperation of other people. So tell your family that this is what you're going to embark on. Share it with them. Share that Excel spreadsheet if you're going to do it on Excel, and tell them that this is what I want to do, and you get that cooperation from them. Okay, I know that this guy wants to do it. I'm going to try and help him out. The other thing that I've seen that really helps is to do some of these things with other people. Right. So if you can get on a Zoom call and say, okay, we're all going to work out for 10 minutes. All right. Let's make it fun. All right. At the end of it, we're going to give ourselves a little reward, maybe a small glass of wine or maybe a chocolate. Okay. But this 10-minute workout, we're going to do or give it our best shot. It turns out that you actually are better when you change faster as groups than you can as individuals. It turns out somewhat paradoxical. But so those are the small things that I would recommend.
I want you to understand what got you started into this whole space of happiness and interest in getting into people's mind and happiness as a subject.
Yeah, I've always been interested in the topic of happiness ever since I was a young kid. Somehow I was drawn to it, and I think that in India especially, you grow up with this idea of enlightenment at a spiritual level, this idea of a blissful state to be in. We have lots of gurus in India, right? Like Osho Rajneesh or Jiddu Krishnamurti, and more recently Sri Ravi Shankar or Jaggi Vasudev and Baba Ramdev. So it's in the air in India that this is the ultimate goal or purpose of life, is to seek the state of enlightenment, which is associated with the positive emotional blissful state, perhaps in perpetuity. So I was always very, very curious about it and very interested in it. And but I did the things that were recommended to me to be quote unquote successful in life. I mentioned this idea that my mom had told me that just work hard, and then later on you can relax. So that I was certainly brought up in that fashion, and I think that it's remarkable about India. Now that I've traveled a lot, I've noticed that lots of countries have different kinds of values, and India, despite it being so poor, right, overall, being not a very wealthy country currently, at least, or in the past, 5-6 decades, there's still such a huge emphasis on education and success and everything. So it's really, really remarkable. So that was always there in the back of my mind. And then I went through all those, checking off all those boxes of getting into the engineering school and then an MBA. And then I ended up, following the path of getting a PhD. And then it just suddenly struck me that after all these achievements, right, how happy am I, right? I mean, because that's important. And I realized, at least for myself, and I saw it in a lot of my batchmates and peers as well, is that despite the success, we're not necessarily as happy and as fulfilled as we imagined we would be with the success, right? So that kind of led me to some kind of introspection, if you will, on what is the purpose of life and why are we getting educated if we're not ending up being in a happier state, leading a more meaningful life, then of what use is all this success? And so as an educator, I felt that, okay, I have an opportunity to actually talk about this topic to my students. And there's no university, no school, certainly in the business context, that was offering a course on happiness and fulfillment. So I felt that this was an important enough question that I should just do something about it. I put the course, this was about 10 years back. And then I thought, okay, maybe I'll get to teach it 2-3 years, 5 years maybe, but it just snowballed in a good way out of control. And here we are, in 10 years later, with a book and 2 online courses and lots of, TED Talks and stuff like that. So there's a deep hunger for the topic around the world, especially perhaps in the business world.
What is one common theme you have noticed that stops people from finding happiness? And you have said smartness comes in the way of happiness. Why? Can you explain and elaborate on that?
Right. So I think in a way, there's going to be a common answer to both questions. The one thing that stops people from being happy is that they often sacrifice happiness for the sake of other things, even without realizing often. Okay, I'll give you a very concrete example of this. A lot of us sacrifice our happiness for the sake of success, for fame, conventional success, fame, money, power, control, what have you. Okay, and it's not even as if we are sacrificing our current happiness for future happiness. That would at least be understandable. I think that even in the moment, we know that this is probably not going to make us lead a happier life, even in the future, but we still chase those things. most of us in relationships know this as well, that we often sacrifice the happiness of the relationship just to prove to the other party that we are right, just to kind of satisfy our ego. We argue about things that are really not worth it. Okay. So lots of examples of this. I call this the fundamental happiness paradox, and I even have a paper on it on my very first chapters in my book. I start out with this, is that we have the intention to lead a happy, meaningful, fulfilling life, but if we observe our actions on an everyday basis, we often sacrifice our happiness for the sake of other things. Okay. And I have a TED talk on this topic too. It's called the Stupidest happiness mistake. If you Google it, it'll come up. Okay. So that is the one thing that I think the big thing that stops us from being happy. And in a way, the reason why it's connected to the second question, which is, how does success or smartness come in the way of happiness, is that oftentimes the very things that lead to smartness and success come in the way of happiness, and we don't even realize it. So I'll give you some concrete examples of this. So perhaps the defining quality of being a smart person is you're very good at thinking. You think through things very well. You're very rational, you're very deliberative, and so on. But oftentimes, that thinking is what leads to rumination. Oftentimes, it's the overthinking that prevents you from being happy, prevents you from being in the moment, and prevents you from kind of enjoying whatever is going on right now without, thinking about all the ways in which things could go wrong, or regrets you might have had about your past life, and so on and so forth. So the very thing that leads to smartness also comes in the way of happiness. Okay, so I think one needs to step back a little bit and ask oneself, okay, what is the overall goal of my life, right?
Yeah.
Why am I doing everything that I'm doing? And if the answer is very, very clear to you, right, it is to lead a happy, fulfilling life, then you got to be in control of your thoughts rather than the thoughts controlling you. Because if the thoughts start controlling you and you can't stop thinking regardless of the situation, it might actually jeopardize the thing that you yourself acknowledge as being the most important goal, which is to lead a happy life. So there's other ways in which smartness and success come in the way of happiness. I think that there's an ego that's developed if you're successful and you start feeling that I'm right, others are wrong. Okay, so you drive away people, you deprioritize your relationships, you become overly control-seeking, and none of those things is good for your happiness either. Okay, especially in the long run, but even in the short run. So if you're really deeply interested in the topic, I'm not trying to kind of put in a plug for my book, but I would recommend my book, okay, because it is on that topic of, and it's
I
called.
was going to ask you, what is the name of your book? And in fact, I have a request to, if you can, or Subbu, you can, please, can you type it for all the attendees? We'd love to know the name of your book.
Sure. Yeah, it's If You're So Smart, Why Aren't You Happy?
Wow. That's a nice name. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a little provocative, but it gets to the crux of the issue, which is that, at the end of it, your smartness doesn't really count for that much in my book. Okay. Other people might disagree. Maybe they don't want happiness, but if you're not, in the end of it all, if you're not using your smartness to lead a happier, more meaningful life, then of what use is that smartness, right? Or for that matter, your success. So that's why I titled it like that. And I'm in a business world. I teach business school students who are all very smart and achievement oriented, and so it was an appropriate title for my target audience.
And you have an online learning module on happiness, no? Could you tell us about that?
Yeah, so there are two courses, online courses, both of which are free. The second course I'll talk about in a little bit is not currently available, but it's going to be available soon, maybe on the 1st of July. But the first course is available, and that was launched 5 years back. It's called A Life of Happiness and Fulfillment. A Life of Happiness and Fulfillment. It's on a MOOC, what's called a MOOC platform. MOOC is MOOC, massive open online course. Platform called Coursera, okay, yeah, which is the world's biggest platform. So if you go to Coursera and type my name out or type happiness course out, there are 3 or 4 courses available on happiness. It'll be one of those, the first 3 or 4. It's called A Life of Happiness and Fulfillment. And it has now close to 350,000 students from around the world, every country in the world. And a lot from India, actually, okay? And maybe not a big surprise because I'm Indian and people can relate to me, but also because the sponsoring institution that produced the course is the Indian School of Business, which is in Hyderabad, right? And also in Mohali. Indian connections are there. And so that is the course that I would recommend if you're interested in this topic. The second course is called Happier Employees and Return on Investment course. Okay, a short for that. The acronym is HEROIC, Happier Employees and Return on Investment course. So if you type, and that is going to be offered. That was offered earlier. We just pulled it out a little bit for a couple of months to fix some things. We're going to relaunch it. That's going to be reoffered around July 1st, I think. And that's on edX, which is another MOOC platform like Coursera, somewhat smaller, but still massive with, 20 million subscribers around the world. edX, EDX is the name of that platform. So if you go to edX and type in my name, Raj Raghunathan, and happiness, that course will come up. And you can take it. That's more focused on organizational happiness. What are some things you can do for yourself? What are some things you can do for your coworkers?
So if you had to tell us something that we could take away, then what would that be?
One thing that I would say I found useful for myself is to remind myself that whatever the level of difficulty, emotional stress, and strife that I'm going through right now, okay, when I look back on this period with hindsight, the wisdom of hindsight, I'm not going to feel so bad about this. Okay. And I've been writing my journal for a long time now, right? When I look back to 5 years and I kind of become wistful and think, things were so simple and lovely then. Okay. All I have to do is read my journal entries from those times. And I discovered that they were just as screwed up as they are now. Okay. At least I felt that way. Or not necessarily screwed up, but, not any more glowy and rosy than, they are right now. So right now is the time, even though it's challenging, kind of get down into the weeds, enjoy it as much as you can, be confident that the future is going to be good. Okay. Future, in a way, even if it's not objectively better, in our subjective experience, we're going to feel that, the past was, even if it was very, very tough, we don't feel as negative about the past. We have some research on this. So just be confident that 2 years from now, maybe not even that long into the future, even a few months from now, you're going to look back on this pandemic and all these struggles that you went through, and you might even be wistful about it. Okay. So you might even say that, okay, I got to spend more time with my family. I had more free times on my hands. I didn't get stuck in traffic. Okay. There's going to be a bunch of positives that you're not really appreciating right now that you're going to really, really miss later on. Okay. So just be confident that good things are going to come out of this. You're going to not just kind of, this is going to pass, but this is going to be pivotal for opening new doors of opportunity in ways that you would not have been able to predict. So be confident about it. Be optimistic. Look out for new doors of opportunity that open up. Grab them and just catapult yourself into the future. Okay, it's going to work out well. I assure you. It's going to be beautiful, and you're going to have a great, beautiful, successful, happy life. Okay, I wish you all the best, all of you.